Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 734 for the 30.October.2022. Almost time for November. Richard Saunders here, coming to you from Sydney, Australia, which is sunny. Wow, that's a change. Blue skies. Birds are singing. Go away, birds. Sometimes they sing too loudly. Sunny in Sydney, but I know other parts of the country are still experiencing flooding rains. Hello to all my friends in Melbourne who I've had reported along the skeptical fairy grapevine that there are still flooding and rain problems in Victoria and Melbourne. Stay afloat, my dear friends in Melbourne, stay afloat. Now, this week's show is a sort of a CSICon special. The Committee for Skeptical Inquiry had their big convention in Las Vagas last weekend. I couldn't attend, which is a pity. I love those sort of things. But my friend Rob Palmer could attend, and he kicks off this week's show with a series of short interviews. He had roaming around the halls at the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas. He speaks to one of the speakers. He interviews one of the speakers, Joseph Uscinski, who was there to talk about conspiracy theories. He also chats to our friend Wendy Hughes about romance scams. Romance scams, a very important issue, and one that you don't hear too much about. Maybe you should hear more about it. There's lots of vulnerable people out there looking for romance online, and you can imagine how vulnerable they could be. So Wendy Hughes will talk to Rob Palmer about romance scams from a very personal point of view. Rob also bumps into Adrienne Hill, and more about Adrienne soon. And finally, he chats to an old friend of mine, Professor Richard Wiseman. And I have enormous respect for Richard Wiseman. I think he does fabulous work, and he is what we might call a top bloke, a really nice guy to boot. Following that report, it's Adrienne Hill, and she turns the tables. She interviews Rob Palmer about being at CSICon and his presentation on the Sunday papers, which is the Sunday afternoon presentations at conventions. We used to have those at the Amazing Meeting too. And Rob gave a presentation about the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project, and he has sent me a video, a YouTube link I'll put on this week's show notes so you can see Rob's presentation about the project for yourself. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for doing that on behalf of the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project, and thank you, Adrienne Hill, for running around CSICon and catching up with Rob for that interview. Then to round off the show, we dip back into Trove, the Trove archives, and find a report about Timothy Good. Timothy Good, the UFO author. And his books include Above Top Secret, The Worldwide UFO Cover-Up, Alien Liaison, and Above Top Secret. Speaking of, as we were earlier, the blue sky and the birds, I don't know if you can hear that, but there are some out my window at the moment having a big conversation about something. Maybe they're looking for UFOs. Have you heard the conspiracy theory that birds aren't real? I mean, sometimes you don't know if this is what we call a send-up. That, that people put out this crazy stuff on the internet knowing it's a joke, and then some people take it seriously. But there is a conspiracy theory that birds aren't real, they're all robots or something like that. So if you hear birds singing, it's not real. I think those ones are real. But now it's time for me to run downstairs and have a nice tin of my favorite drink, which is root beer from the United States. I found a new outlet here in... Hello, what's this? What do you want? It's Henrietta, the Skeptic Zone cat. She's just walking up the stairs here to the studio. Hello. Have you found a mouse? I hope not. What are you looking at? She's not very talkative, but There she is. Henny. Anyway, as I was saying, I found a new supplier for my favourite drink, root beer. I'm going to run downstairs and have a nice can of root beer, cold frosty root beer right out of the fridge. While I do that, are you okay there, Henrietta? I wonder what you found. While I do that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. What is it? What is it?
I'm wandering the halls of CSICon on Friday, and I ran into one of the speakers. Please introduce yourself and let us know what your talk is about.
Hi, I'm Joe Uscinski, and I'll be talking on Saturday about conspiracy theories.
That's one of my favorite topics. So I previously interviewed you in a pre-conference interview, and I found the topics fascinating. So could you hit the high points of what you're going to be speaking about?
So I love coming to CSICon because I get to talk to like-minded people and be skeptical of things, and we should certainly be skeptical of conspiracy theories. But it's been 4 years since I've been here, and we've been apart, and I figured rather than coming out and talking to the choir, I thought it would be a great idea to touch on some ideas where maybe we might disagree. So I'm going to be talking about the media narrative about conspiracy theories that's taken shape over the last few years, one which gained a lot of popular support. The idea that conspiracy theories are more believed now than ever, that they're being driven by social media, and that all sorts of terrible things are happening simply because of those conspiracy theories. So I'm going to take that narrative and put it to the test with empirical data I've been gathering over the last decade. And I think there might be some members of the audience who are going to disagree with me. I'm sure there'll be some other speakers who disagree with me, but I'm going to keep what I'm doing tied to the data.
So which talks of the speakers besides yourself are you most interested in attending?
Well, I was most interested in seeing Wiseman this morning, who was talking about, we don't really see the world as it is. We see the world through our psychological filters, right? And that leads us to have very biased impressions of what we see. And I find that's certainly the case with conspiracy theories. We all believe what we want to believe. We all believe what makes sense to us, and rarely is that tied in any way to evidence.
It's interesting. All right, well, thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you.
I found someone else who is new to CSICon. She had attended TAMS in the past, but this is her first CSICon conference. Wendy Hughes, would you like to say a little bit about yourself? Why you're here at CSICon, perhaps?
This is the first conference, skepticism conference, that I've been to in probably 5 or 6 years, partly because of the pandemic, but also some changes in my life,
Okay.
Death in the family, but just I needed to be here. And Susan had to kind of talk me into it.
And Susan Gerbic
is my dear friend, and we've been friends for over 10 years, I think. And we had discussions about it, and I wasn't sure because I'd never come to CSICon before, but I'm so glad I'm here.
Glad you're here too.
Thank you. It's so nice after knowing people online and feeling like we are friends.
Mostly through Susan's online trivia game every Thursday.
The Thursday night trivia
that
game.
That would be Friday in Australia.
That's right, and because it's international.
Yes.
But to be in the same room together now.
So what was the talk we just came from?
That was the talk we just came from. Was Richard Dawkins bestowing a prize on Neil deGrasse Tyson. It was amazing. I mean, it was like these giant brains, heroes of our
little club,
our universe. To hear them joking around together was hilarious. And I think they're like normal people, to get to see them be that way. And they were kind of bickering about how many honorary doctorates that Neil deGrasse Tyson has. And that was so much fun to watch. It was mind-blowing, and it's only one of the special presentations that we've been able to see just in the
So let me
past
ask you for
couple days.
another one that we were both at earlier in the day. Susan Gerbic, everyone on the Skeptic Zone knows Susan, I think, did her presentation, and amazingly, your photo popped up there. Why was that?
I had a personal experience that it was humiliating, and I had to go through my own feelings about it. I was scammed in a romance scam, and I decided to write an article about it, and Susan
And this was published in
Skeptical Inquirer online. So Susan, she said, submit it, and I'm going, oh, okay. And Barry Carr read the draft, and he said, wow, he didn't even know about romance scams.
That's interesting. He had not heard of the concept.
No. And he said, this is certainly something different from what we usually publish. But I just happened to think that it was, judging by the response to this article, I think it's agreed that this particular concept deserves attention from the skeptic world as much as the people that claim to be able to predict the future, or what do they call psychics?
Yep.
That claim to be able to connect living people with their dead loved ones.
Mediums.
And because it's all scams, and so it appeared online. The article appeared online the week of this conference.
Yes,
and so Susan, I was sitting in the front row to watch Susan's presentation next to you, and I couldn't believe it. I saw the pictures on her screen that she included the story about my article in her presentation. I was honored, and it felt so good, and was so. I was laughing.
I saw the emotion on your face. That was great. And
I am honored to have this little article in Skeptical Inquirer online.
And I hope it helps people, because I personally, as I've told you, know people who were involved with romance scams.
It turns out a lot of people have, and they don't like talking about it because they feel awkward.
Right. And certainly part of skepticism, we've heard this before, is it's sort of the intersection of pushing back on pseudoscience and that sort of thing, but also consumer protection. And this is certainly the part of consumer protection, right? Science communication and consumer protection.
I make that clear in the beginning of the article that the elevator pitch for any of these conferences, when the other tourists see us walking around with our badges, is to ask, like, what is CSICon? What is skepticism? Or like in TAM, for example, for years. And
the amazing meeting that is.
The amazing meeting, that we needed an elevator pitch to try to explain what we're doing here. And skepticism, we say, is the intersection of science and consumer protection. And I pretty much have adopted that as my orientation as a hobby skeptic, that's what I'm interested in, and that was where I was coming from with the article. Thank you for asking me about it.
Fantastic that you're doing that, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Likewise. Thank you very much.
This is an addendum. If you'd like to find Wendy's article, you can Google "A Skeptic Trips Over a Romance Scam" by Wendy Hughes. So it's late Friday night, and I'm wandering the halls of CSICon after seeing Richard Dawkins interview Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I met somebody that may be familiar to Skeptic Zone listeners. Hello, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Adrienne Hill from Canada.
I think I've maybe heard your voice sometime on the Skeptic Zone podcast.
Every once in a while. Every once in a while.
Wait a minute, can I count on you?
Right now, I'm not sure. My brain is rather dead. It's been a crazy couple days, but awesome.
So this is not your first time at a CSICon, right?
It is not. This is my second time. The first time I went was 2018, and I met you. It's the first time I met you.
I do recall. That's when you were a shill for Banachek and got up on stage and did whatever he said.
Exactly. That was a surprise, but rather fun. And I still don't know how he managed that trick, but but
He's magic.
he's
clearly.
magic. Clearly magic.
So what have you thought of this year's conference so far?
Phenomenal. So far, it has been so fun. The speakers have been magnificent. Neil deGrasse Tyson last night, his speech went overtime, so we didn't get a Q&A, and I was actually really happy about it because he was so amazing.
Were you going to ask a question?
No. Maybe that's why I was okay with it. But no, he was so entertaining and so engaging. I was quite happy that he carried on.
And so tonight was the second night we heard from him.
Yes.
You want to talk about that?
I thought it was very good. I thought I enjoy the lecture style, but the back and forth between him and Richard Dawkins was pretty good too. I find Richard Dawkins a very entertaining soul himself. Okay, let me say that again. I find him a very entertaining person.
I do recall somehow one of them used the phrase soul,
Yes.
and it jumped out at me as odd, right? Did Neil say that? Like, you can look into, I'm going to look at your soul through your eyes or something?
Something like that, yeah. I think maybe that was stuck in my head. And of course, I was so excited. First thing this morning was Richard Wiseman, who I'm a huge fan of. And of course, our good old friend Susan Gerbic was amazing as usual. Lots of energy. And
Great talk. And Kenny Biddle.
Kenny Biddle is awesome. How could I forget Kenny?
Can't forget Kenny.
Can't forget Kenny. His talk was really good. Well, they've all been really good. There has not been a bad talk today.
And what are you looking forward to for the rest of the conference?
Oh, you stumped me on that one. Oh, I'm really excited about hearing from fellow Canadian Timothy Caulfield tomorrow because he is not only Canadian, but he's from my province of Alberta. So he's a fellow Albertan. And there's a great lineup of speakers, so I'm just looking forward to the whole day. And I'm actually really excited about, there's a speaker on Sunday, and
Who might that be, Adrienne?
and he's going to talk about a really important topic, which is the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project.
I think I've heard something about that.
Yeah.
And maybe you were connected with that.
Just a little bit. But I'm not talking about it. It's someone called the Unknown Skeptic, I think.
I don't think that's it.
No, maybe it's Rob Palmer.
The Unknown Skeptic. So actually, you're going to see your article on the screen, and you're going to see your face up there.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for the forewarning. I won't be too embarrassed. Well, thank you for the shout out in advance.
Okay, and thank you very much for this interview.
Awesome. It's great to see you again in person.
I'll be listening for you on the Skeptic Zone. The session in honor of James Randi, an honest liar, just ended. And look who I found wandering the halls.
It's me, Richard Wiseman. You found me wandering the halls, aimlessly wandering the halls, trying to find our way back to the hotel.
That was a great session. In an hour and a half, I wasn't expecting it to be that long. First, it started off with Massimo interviewing Davy, and then you took over, and you want to talk about that part of it?
Yes, so I was talking to Massimo and Davy, who's Randy's partner, to Tyler Meeson, who made the documentary, and to Banachek, because he was involved in Project Alpha.
Who you got to do some magic for us.
Well, he did some amazing fork bending, some metal bending there.
And twisting. I've never even heard of that.
He did some twisting, and it was great. We had some clips of Randy that hadn't been seen before, and yeah, it just felt like a really lovely celebration, not only of his work, which is obviously sort of stellar within skepticism, but of Randy as a person. So it was a lovely event.
Absolutely. It was very moving. Especially the David part.
When David was talking, the two or three people in front of me were, because I was in the audience at that point, crying their eyes out.
Wow.
So yeah, he brought a dimension to it, and he's very nervous about being here.
Oh, he's not usually in the spotlight like this. He's an artist, so he doesn't do speaking.
So it was lovely that he was involved. We just spent the last couple of days hanging out with him and talking. As a sort of a charming, wonderful person. So many great memories, because you forget Randy was involved in every important moment of skepticism, in the last 60, 70 years. And Davey was with him for that time. So he's met everyone, he's been involved in everything, and it's great to get his perspective on it.
Absolutely. Plus the Alice Cooper thing, which is not skepticism, but that was amazing.
Oh.
Most people have not heard of that, I'm sure.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, no, Randy toured with Alice Cooper, chopping his head off with a big guillotine on a nightly basis. So, yeah, it's great, and the documentary Honest Liar is superb, so we had a clip of that, and Tyler gave us perspective on that. So, yeah, it felt like it was something you wouldn't see anywhere else.
And for people who don't know, by the way, Paula Serrano, who has been on the Skeptic Zone, she did the Spanish subtitles for that documentary.
There we go.
So,
I did not know that.
Yeah.
So, no, it's a wonderful documentary. Superb.
Highly recommend it.
Won lots of awards. So, yeah, it felt like a special event. I don't think you see it anywhere else, and we did it.
And you also did a talk yourself.
I did.
The other day. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
I did my Investigating the Impossible talk, where we look at magic and the paranormal, which is the sort of standard take on the impossible. And then I look at it and go, it's really interesting that we can even represent the impossible in our heads, which is why we can understand magic and think about paranormal stuff. And I kind of celebrate that notion, turn it around, and talk about how that allows us to think of seemingly impossible things and then go out and do it for real. And the example I gave was the Apollo moon landings.
Yes.
But when I talk about that, normally it's about changing people's lives and how sometimes we go, oh, that's impossible. But actually, often we can do it.
Fantastic.
So that's what that was about.
Thank you very much. I'm glad I caught up with you again here.
Pleasure.
Enjoy
Thank
the rest
you.
of the conference.
And you.
The Australian Skeptics Annual National Convention, SkepticCon 2022, will be held on December 3rd through 4th, the first weekend of December. Go to the ticket sales page at skepticon.org.au to choose full in-person, one-day in-person, or streaming options. The event will be held at the National Library of Australia. The theme is Skepticism in a Changed World, and the lineup of speakers includes Claire Klingenberg, President of the European Council of Skeptical Organizations, the hosts of European Skeptics Podcast, and live stream talks by Skeptics Guide to the Universe host, Dr. Stephen Novella, and Skeptoid host, Brian Dunning. There is also a wide variety of domestic speakers, including Major General Mike Ryan, retired, who will be speaking on science fiction and security professionals, author David Dufty on Radio Girl, ACT Academy of Sport psychologist Christine Dunn on superstitions in sport, controversial author Clive Hamilton on being censored, and many more scientific and skeptical topics. For full details, visit skepticon.org.au.
You can count on Adrienne with Adrienne Hill.
Hello, this is Adrienne Hill reporting from CSICon 2022. And who have I found here but Rob Palmer?
Hello, Skeptic Zone listeners.
And I've been tasked with interviewing Rob about all the work he has done. He's been quite a busy person, not only during the conference, but leading up to the conference. You were busy interviewing everybody that was going to be speaking. I believe it was everybody, was it not?
Well, you mean the pre-conference interviews I did for the Skeptical Inquirer magazine?
That is correct.
Right. No, I did 12 of the speakers, and there's in previous years that might have been a number that would have caught everybody. But since they did this conference, my recollection is speakers used to have an hour, and most of the people this time had a half hour.
That's
but it's
correct.
the same amount of time, and so therefore there were almost double the number of speakers. There were some 1 hour sections for Neil deGrasse Tyson and Richard Dawkins talking to Tyson and the James Randi homage.
Yes.
But all the regular speakers got the maximum of a half hour, and therefore we got so many more people. So I interviewed 12 of those people, which was a significant amount, but not all of them.
But very interesting. I watched most of them, and I loved it. I thought it was a really good way of getting excited about the conference.
I was hoping that would be it. I wanted to find a way to help them promote the conference to people who were on the fence, especially because of the pandemic, about coming. So what I did is I looked over the speaker roster myself, realized how much time I had left to go. It was about 2 months at that point, maybe 2.5. And I said, okay, how many can I get? You have to schedule interviews with people, not available instantly. And I said, well, let me see, maybe I can get about 12 in. And I sent a list to Barry Carr. And I said, these are the people I think I'd be interested in. Or maybe it was 10. And then I said, and by the way, I would love to interview Neil deGrasse Tyson and Penn, but I don't think you should even bother asking them. And he said, no, I'll ask them anyway. I don't think they'll say yes. I think you're correct. And then the first person to respond is Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'd love to do it with you. And then the next one is Penn. It was amazing.
Yeah, that was amazing. Both interviews I thought were fascinating. So were those the sort of two, because they were so surprising, were those your highlights? Or was there anything else surprising you found out?
Well, they were all interesting. I think Neil was the most surprising. And I spent the most time with him just because when else am I going to get to talk to Neil deGrasse Tyson in a captive audience?
Yes.
Right? He's very generous with his time. I've seen that here. People come up to him and he will talk to them like they're friends. It is quite amazing. But he probably could have talked for 2 hours for me. I knew I was going to try to cut these interviews down to at most 40 minutes. And we went on for an hour and 20 or so.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. And he was just very friendly. And it was just a surprise. And it was also my first one.
Oh, that was
my first one. Yeah. So the big name of the conference was my first one. And then Penn was shortly after that. He agreed. It took a while to get a time because they were very busy, Penn and Teller, with his agents. But that was another big one because I've seen their shows and I'm always so impressed. And I get to interview Penn.
Exactly.
But the other thing is, unfortunately, most of my in real life friends, when I told them the big news, I'm going to get to interview Neil deGrasse Tyson, they go, who?
Oh, no.
I guess I shouldn't bother to tell you any of the other scientists I'm interviewing, because if you don't know Neil deGrasse Tyson. And then I said, well, how about, Penn from Penn? Oh, yeah, that's amazing. So everyone knew Penn.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think that was a wonderful thing you did. And you've also been really busy interviewing a lot of first-time attendees, from what I understand, and watching the conference yourself. Do you have what was your favorite moment of the conference, do you think?
I think the highlight was Neil deGrasse Tyson's Cosmic Perspectives. I think that was the title. It was basically about where we really fit in with the universe. And he had an hour to talk about that. And that was really great. And then he had another hour on the stage with an interview by Richard Dawkins with him. And it was really interesting banter between them.
It was.
Yes. Both of those were highlights.
Lots of joking between the two of them.
And the other highlight, of course, happened to be somebody who presented something about the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project.
Oh, you've scooped me. That was my next question. Because we had today the Sunday papers, which I think is a highlight. And a lot of people, unfortunately, leave because they have to get back to work and maybe it's a long way to get home. But I think a lot of people don't go because they're not really understanding what's happening. Part of it is just people think the conference is over. So if you're listening and you're coming to CSICon, don't miss the Sunday papers. Because to me, some of those talks are real highlights. I've been twice to CSICon, once in 2018 and this time in 2022. I loved it. And of course, I'm a little biased, but I think my favorite, or at least one of my favorites, was definitely yours, Rob. It was wonderful. Oh. I think it was really, really well done.
Is that because your face was up on the screen for a moment there? And your name on the top of one of the slides?
There you go. I think it was the waffle.
That's right. That was your Zoom backdrop.
My Zoom backdrop was me with a big waffle behind me. So tell us what you talked about.
Well, so this topic should be of interest, and nobody in the Skeptic Zone should be surprised because it was Richard Saunders' project, the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project, which has been talked about a lot in the Skeptic Zone. Richard started it off many, many, many years ago, and then by collecting paranormal predictions, and then it came to the point of having to score nearly 4,000 predictions, and he realized it would take a large effort over a long period of time or a big team. And so as the lockdowns from the pandemic started, he, with the aid of Susan Gerbic, organized an international team of skeptics to review all the predictions he had collected and collectively decide on a scoring for each of the predictions. So I reported on this project, everything from the data collection to how we scored and what the results were.
Yeah, and of course you included some of the most fun predictions, such as the predictions that Trump or Biden was going to win. Those types of things.
It's up to the people to decide how that one ended.
Yeah.
But the most amazing one that shows sometimes these people don't know what the hell they're talking about is that after his election, and this would be, the actual only election Trump won, after his election, he would leave the White House voluntarily because he just got fed up with it.
Yeah.
And these people don't know Donald Trump's personality because he lost an election and still wouldn't leave.
That's right. Exactly.
Right. And the other amazing, absolutely astounding, and I don't understand what goes through people's heads, people's is meaning people who claim to have psychic abilities, is the one that anti-gravity will no longer be just a pipe dream of science fiction, but will be available to everyone, basically. And this was from 2001. Did anyone buy an anti-gravity machine that I'm unaware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
And the psychic who made that prediction marked herself as correct in 2001.
And I think the audience appreciated it. There were lots of laughs. There were lots of sighs, groans, that type of thing. And I think the other thing that's really cool or really interesting about the papers, the Sunday papers, is you only have 15 minutes to talk. So
goes by freaking fast.
Did you find that really hard?
Well, it is the third time I did it with the same time limit. And not wanting to be yanked off the stage because I was running late, and my predisposition is to do everything very formally, I had a printout of what slide I needed to be on by what time to make it to 15 minutes. So every few slides I looked down at it to see if I was ahead of the schedule, behind the schedule. So It was reasonably easy to keep up that way.
And you were right on time.
Yeah, so that was interesting. And one other thing, when you put this, to apply for the Sunday papers, it's a multi-step process. You send in a proposal, and then they whittle down whatever number of proposals they get to something like double the number of people they're actually going to choose. Right. So if you pass that first filter, they send you an email that says, congratulations, we would like to now see your presentation. And then you have something like 2 weeks to do the presentation. And by the way, also write a paper worthy of publication on that topic. If you don't really have something prepared, that's a lot to do in 2 weeks, especially depending what your work life is like. I did it every single time I've done it on a paper I already published in Skeptical Inquirer. So that was already done.
Right.
I just point them to that. So I just had to make the presentation, which I was able to do.
Yeah, it was excellent.
But then, because there is a reasonable chance, at that point it's about 50-50, that it will be accepted and you'll actually talk. I didn't want to say I wasted the time. So I reached out to other organizations that I know are interested in this kind of topic. And I have already presented a longer version of it. Since I had the 15-minute version, I was going to be the only speaker at these events. I put a lot more interesting stuff about things they missed and things about Queen Elizabeth and things about religion that they got wrong. And, it was a deeper dive into the details that I did not have time for here.
Right.
So I actually thought those were better presentations, but you got 15 minutes here and that's all you could do.
Which is a skill.
Yeah. You have to do the meat of it and cut out any extras.
Well, I think you did a good job of that.
Thank you.
So it was very, very interesting.
I did a hat trick this year, in fact, and I think this is a CSICon record. I was the only person I know about to speak 3 times in a row. Of course, we didn't have conference the last 2 years.
Right.
But the 3 conferences that were held in a row, which was 2018, 19, and 22, I spoke at the Sunday papers each time. And it was a thrill to do that. I was very honored. But it is disappointing, as you mentioned, that so many people have left.
Yes.
There's probably a third of the people maybe in the audience by that time. And yes, some of it is because, especially if you're flying back to the East Coast, I'm leaving tomorrow to do that, and my flight's at 11. So you have to be at the airport 2 hours early.
That's right.
That's what happens. Even if you stayed through Sunday, you're not going to be leaving late in the afternoon. Otherwise, you're going to arrive after midnight. What's the point of that? But I do think the conference could do a better job of explaining what it is so that people in advance, before they book their airline tickets, know that it's something that they should stick around to see, and hoping I see that in the future.
Exactly.
This year, they actually made an improvement. It's the first time on the official schedule on the website that they put the schedule for the Sunday papers so that when you clicked in the schedule Sunday papers, it popped up everyone who was going to be there.
Yes.
That had never happened before. Now, it went on fairly late this year, and maybe they'll do a better job next year for that, and more people will stay.
It would be nice to have an insert with the program.
So an insert might be appropriate. That's a good idea. I believe the original pamphlet that gives the schedule and all of that is printed way in advance because I know who the speakers are. But the process to become a Sunday paper speaker is not settled until I think it's the last day of the month of September, which is then less than 3 weeks before.
Right.
So that would be hard for them to wait, I think, to print that by then, probably. But I think an insert could be doable.
Right.
Right.
Just something
print
last minute.
One sheet of paper and add it to everything. Right. Good idea. Let's send this to Barry Carr for next year.
It sounds good. There's one interview I don't think you were expecting to get this weekend during the conference.
Yes, you. When I came up to you in the hallway, and I said, "Can I interview you as a conference attendee?" I didn't expect that, and you said yes. And so I don't know if it's
Surprise!
I don't know what order it's going to go on, but
Oh, you're silly. There's somebody else that was a little more important.
Maybe you're referring to somebody named Dawkins.
That's
Richard
the
Dawkins?
one, because I had a very excited Rob Palmer run up to me.
He is a tough fish to reel in. I have at previous conferences attempted this, and it just didn't work. He was very busy. Basically sloughed me off and said, talk to his scheduler, didn't have time, and I didn't pursue it very heavily after that. I got lucky. He was in the book room, and it was not a very crowded room, so nobody was near him. Let me try one last time. I said, do you know about the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia? No, but I'm going to Australia, so that might be interesting to talk there. And he said, do you want to do that now? Yeah. So we went to the little room next door, and we did a short interview.
That's awesome. I'm really looking forward to hearing it again because, of course, Rob did play it for me. Well, I think that's everything for today. Until next time, this is Adrienne Hill from Las Vegas, CSICon 2022.
Carrie, is it?
Oh, yes. Hi, I'm Carrie.
I am Psychic Ross, and I will be reading you this evening.
Oh, interesting. Well, okay. I co-host a podcast. It's called Oh No, Ross and Carrie.
Yes, I'm sensing that. The spirits are telling me. It is a show about
Well, it's about
poodles.
like fringe science and
Yes,
spirituality
that's
and claims
correct.
of the paranormal.
And
oh, you knew that.
You do research online.
But more importantly, like we do in-person investigations.
In-person investigate as well.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
See?
Me and my friend, this is so weird, my friend Ross, same name as you.
Weird.
He and I just go and try them all out. And actually, we've gone to a number of psychics. And to be honest with you, it's a lot like this. It's called Oh No, Ross and Carrie. They can find it at MaximumFun.org.
I could have told you that.
Now it's time once again to look into those archives at Trove. At trove.nla.gov.au, the online resource from the Australian Government and the National Library of Australia, who work very hard to digitise thousands upon thousands of newspapers, articles and so on going back centuries. This week I thought we'd look up an article written about an author, Timothy Good. Now if we go to Wiki and we look up Mr. Good, Timothy Good, we find that Timothy Good, born in 1942, is a British author on UFOs. His books include Above Top Secret, The Worldwide UFO Cover-Up, Alien Liaison, and Beyond Top Secret, all published by Sidgwick and Jackson. Good has made many television and documentary appearances. Critics challenged the reality of his writings. He is also a career violinist. And if we look down the page a little bit, we find criticisms. Martin Bridgestock, who I know, Martin Bridgestock, Dr. Martin Bridgestock is a very well-respected Australian skeptic. Martin Bridgestock, in a review of Above Top Secret, the worldwide UFO cover-up for The Skeptic, which is the journal from Australian skeptics, in 1989, identified two of the book's central ideas: that unidentified flying objects, UFOs, do exist and are spacecraft from other worlds, and there is a worldwide cover-up about UFOs with security agencies seeking to suppress evidence. Bridgestock concluded that the book is not a clear, rigorous survey of the evidence for UFOs. It is a polemical volume which seems to be devoted to making the case for UFOs, and a cover-up seems as convincing as possible. However, inspection of the thesis put forward in the book and checking of a few cases with other sources seem to show that the book is not reliable and its conclusions cannot be trusted. However, let's turn the clock back to the year 1992, so barely 3 years after Martin Bridgestock was writing in The Skeptic. And we find in the Canberra Times from Wednesday the 12th of February in the midweek magazine section, dangerous liaisons with aliens, rabbits, and flying saucers. Timothy Good believes we are regularly visited by ETs, as Cal McChrystal discovers. Timothy Good has been described as a, quote, manic, end quote, whose, quote, shill yappings, end quote, are believed only by, quote, subnormal people, end quote. This makes him smile all the way to the bank. He has 2 strings to his bow. As an accomplished violinist, he was with the London Symphony Orchestra for 14 years and has played under many famous conductors. Beside the window of his Beckenham flat hangs a picture of Beethoven. In front of the window is a camera clamped to a tripod. The powerful telephoto lens points to the sky. Somewhere up there are creatures which provide the bow's second string, extraterrestrial biological entities. Mr. Good is a student of flying saucers, aliens, and of what he asserts is a near impenetrable conspiracy by governments to hide the truth. As a UFO buff, he has profited handsomely from books on the subject. 2 things prompted me to meet him. The first was a letter from his literary agent, Andrew Loney, lamenting that, quote, it is easy to poke fun at Tim, end quote, who deserved, quote, a fair hearing, end quote. The second was his appearance on a Scottish hillside last week of the world's first monument to a visit by a UFO. The metal plaque in West Lothian commemorates the 1979 sighting of a spaceship which overpowered a forestry worker, tore his clothes, and gassed him before speeding off. It so happens that Tim Good's father, who worked in radar, shared an RAF camp with, quote, Starship Clark, end quote, as he was then known during and after World War II. Arthur Clarke was called a complete nutter in those days, Mr. Good says pleasantly. UFO monitors tend to get mocked mercilessly. Reaction can be at best skeptical. At worst, a howl of ridicule. In his latest book, Alien Liaison, The Ultimate Secret, about to be released in paperback in Britain, Arrow, £4.99, Mr. Good describes conversations which others have had with beings from outer space, adding, though highly evolved spiritually, these people were down to earth in the sense that they enjoyed creature comforts, and, thank heavens, they had a sense of humour. His own sense of humour helps him cope with reviewers, one of whom wrote of an earlier volume, Above Top Secret, The Worldwide UFO Cover-Up, quote, I do not know how many trees were cut down to produce this 590-page diatribe, but I wish they had been left standing. Mr. Good's ideas are those of a maniac, end quote. The Alien Liaison. Of Alien Liaison, the same writer declared, quote, it is painful to turn to the shrill yappings of Timothy Good. The thesis, which he shouts rather than argues, is that aliens are constantly visiting Earth and that the US government is covering them up. Really? only mentally subnormal people could believe in it, end quote. Another reviewer found it, quote, credulous bunk, end quote. Most reviewers are kinder, however. His literary agent, a military historian with knowledge of intelligence matters, sent me a photograph of his client which resembles Captain Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. In the flesh, he seems less exotic. Tall, grey-haired, pale, serious, courteous, softly spoken. He wears an elegant grey suit and a dark blue tie. His hands are long and hairless, the fingers tapering artistically. There is a sty on his right eyelid. The bedroom, which he shares with his girlfriend, a teacher, has a wall lined with UFO books. In the hall are shelves of classified documents from many parts of the world and folders of newspaper and magazine clippings. Along the wall, in the living room, are hi-fi equipment, LPs and tapes. Against another is a word processor. Near the sky-probing camera are a music stand supporting sheets of bark, an Art Deco china cabinet, and an enormous hi-fi speaker. He serves coffee in red cups and sticks a cigarette into a holder. Mr. Good, now 49, had just entered his teens when a cousin in American computer research sent him a book about space aliens. I was immediately excited, he says. There had been reports of military and civilian airline pilots that the general public wasn't aware of. To date, 3,500 sightings since the 1940s. The majority remain classified, in the interests of national security, the various government agencies say, but details of some have been released. He shows me documents he obtained using the U.S. Freedom of Information Act from the Pentagon, North American Aerospace Defense Command, and other sources. Sections have been blacked out by the censor. His pursuit of, quote, the truth, end quote, that UFOs exist and their occupants actually walk the earth, and that governments know a lot more than they're prepared to acknowledge, intensified after he left the London Symphony Orchestra in 1978. He still does session work, including television commercials and films. In 1983, he published an extraordinary volume about UFOs at his own expense. 2,000 copies were sold, bringing in a tiny profit. His research has taken him into the Pentagon and the White House office and has talked, sometimes inconclusively, to the CIA, military officers, and space scientists. Above Top Secret, published by Sidgwick and Jackson in 1987, and later by Grafton Books, went to the top of the bestseller lists in Britain and Australia, and has since done well in the United States, Canada, Germany, and Japan. Alien Liaison 2 is likely to be a commercial success. 18,000 hardback sales already. It is dedicated to Britain's former Chief of Defence Staff, Admiral of the Fleet, Lord Hill Norton, whose introductory comments include the words, I have known Timothy Good for about 10 years, during which I have formed the opinion that he is both honest and reliable. I am quite sure that he is not a nutcase. The book is, by its nature, weird, referring, for example, to alleged encounters between Etherians, occupants of UFOs, and two American Republican presidents, Dwight Eisenhower and Ronald Reagan. According to Mr. Good's informants, during an unscheduled visit to the Edwards Air Force Base in California, Eisenhower was taken to Hangar 27, where a flying saucer and its occupants were housed. The Etherians had the same proportions as humans and were able to breathe our atmosphere, Mr. Good records. They spoke English and supposedly informed the president that they wanted to start an educational program for the people of Earth, then reportedly demonstrated their paranormal powers by making themselves invisible, causing Eisenhower considerable embarrassment. Ike, who often had difficulty stringing sentences together, could have used an educational program. Ditto, Ronald Reagan. In 1974, according to Mr. Good, the then airborne governor of California saw, quote, a big light, end quote, and ordered the pilot to give chase. We followed it for several minutes. Reagan is reported as having said, all of a sudden, to our utter amazement, it went straight up into the heavens. We got off the plane and I told Nancy all about it. 8 years later, while viewing the film E.T. in the White House, President Reagan whispered to the producer, Steven Spielberg, there are probably only 6 people in this room who know how true it is. Mr. Good says, I haven't actually confirmed that last bit with Spielberg, but I will. Then there is Jimmy Carter's sighting. During his 1976 presidential election campaign, Carter announced that he had seen a UFO in 1969. I asked Mr. Good, quote, did you know about Jimmy Carter's giant rabbit, end quote? No. Well, towards the end of his presidency, he declared that while out in a boat fishing on a lake in Plains, Georgia, he was attacked by a giant rabbit. It came swimming towards him, and he had to head for the shore to avoid being capsized. Oh, Mr. Good says, wondering if I'm mocking him. I'm not. I suspect a large part of Mr. Good's struggle is trying to lift the UFO subject out of the realm of entertainment. Out There, a 1990 book by the former New York Times journalist Howard Bloom, whose work the Englishman admires, is being made into a Disney film. A former U.S. astronaut, Edgar Mitchell, who has claimed that important information on extraterrestrials is being suppressed by his government, ended up on the Oprah Winfrey Show. When Mr. Good himself appeared on a British television discussion recently, one of his interlocutors, the pop scientist Heinz Wolf, described Mr. Good's work as, quote, bollocks, end quote. But while critics tease, he points to the fact that American scientists will begin a 10-year, $100 million project this October using the most sophisticated listening devices to search for alien civilizations. The NASA project will be called SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, rhyming with Yeti, another elusive quarry. I suggest to the violinist there is a contradiction here. On the one hand, he claims that U.S. officialdom has firm evidence of extraterrestrials, while on the other, the official agency, NASA, is setting out to test their existence. He concedes there is a tremendous argument against everything I'm saying. But he nods confidently at his folders of classified CIA material showing UFOs to be a high-priority matter. Mr. Good has enlisted helpers from all over the world, including Chinese and Russians. Their sightings are published in his annual UFO report, which he edits. In it, he identifies hoaxes, some, but not all, crop circles, and explores other phenomena in minute detail, including scientific evaluation of photographs and videotapes of, quote, aberrations, end quote. I have read all this stuff with a fairly open mind, even the account of the removal by aliens of a cow's udder and vagina. Mr. Good does not seem dogmatic about his material or his qualifications for analyzing it. I left school with 13% in maths, O level, he says. As the, quote, fair hearing, end quote, ends, he murmurs, I hope I am not a fanatic. And again, this comes from the Canberra Times, dated the 12th of February, 1992, so over 30 years ago. And now Mr. Good is 80 years old. And in all the years he's been producing UFO books and doing television appearances and interviews and collecting items and so on, the evidence still does not support his conclusions after decades and decades and decades. And on a TV interview I found online, Timothy Good describes himself as being an authority on UFOs and aliens. And I can imagine all those years ago when this interview was conducted, that if you were to say to Timothy Good or other UFO believers of the time, something like, I will give you 10, no, I'll give you 20, no, I'll give you 30 years to confirm your suspicions, your beliefs, your conclusions or whatever. Do you think within the next 30 years it'll be just accepted that UFOs are here and aliens are real and we've made contact? They would have undoubtedly said yes, of course, absolutely, no doubt about it. And even today you'd probably find the same thing if you happen to come across a UFO exponent and say, well, I'll give you 30 years. Well, who knows, eh? Who knows? Within the next 30 years, using our advanced telescopes, we may be able to spot evidence of another civilization altering planets somewhere out there in the cosmos. Which is one thing. The next thing, of course, is have they bothered traveling to Earth? Maybe they have better things to do. Well, there you go. Another interesting find. Just flipping through the pages, doing various searches. I must admit, I stumbled across this article because I was running a search for the word hoax. And the word hoax appears in this article. So, well, it just goes to show that when you go to Trove or other online newspapers, you never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Henrietta the cat is back. Hello. Hello. What do you want? You want a scratch? Oh. She doesn't know what she wants. Thank you to those people who continue to support the Skeptic Zone at skepticzone.tv. Via Patreon or PayPal means the show keeps going, and it means very soon, I think it's time I upgraded my main device. What was that? What are you doing on the stairs? She's got the zooms. Cat lovers, cat owners will know what I mean. Cats sometimes zoom around. I'm going to upgrade. I'm going to buy a new iPad before long, I think. I've had this current one for about, not 6 years, 5 years, which I do most of the production for the Skeptic Zone. All the audio work is done on the iPad, the writing of the web page. The research mostly is done on iPad. It's a very, very useful device. So your contributions mean I can upgrade and hopefully even provide you... What is it? What is it? Her ears are pinned back. She's got that look in her eye. Hopefully provide you with a better listening experience. What is it? There's a paw coming around the door. This is getting... Yes? Yes? This is complete... Yeah. Now there's a paw under the door. I've lost my train of thought. Thank you, Henrietta. Thank you. I think she wants my job. But to sum up what I'm trying to say, thank you to all those people who do support the Skeptic Zone. Off she goes. Coming up on next week's show, more reports from Rob Palmer in Las Vegas. As you heard, he got to interview all sorts of people. But for this week, I better go out and run around after Henrietta the cat. Maybe she wants some more breakfast. I don't know. But for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.
Hello, this is Adrienne Hill. I told you I don't need scripted giggles.
What's funny about your name? That's all you said. It's not like it was a joke before that or anything. All right. People have been drinking a lot here. Have you been in the bar?
Yeah, the bar of water. I don't need anything to giggle. Okay.